Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I am here once again with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, it feels good to say that. It's been a long time and we can only apologise for how long it's been, guys. I actually think it's really humbling, Dan, to see the people sort of replying to our tweets and replying in the comments of older podcasts asking where we'd been and what's up. I can only apologize for not answering or replying. I didn't want to speak on behalf of Dan or myself, but life had just been really busy. But we're back and this feels good, mate. This feels right.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm really excited. And I'm really excited because this podcast is back. I'm really excited because of what we got to talk about today. It's like threefold, man. I'm yeah, super buzzing to be here. Let's talk some transfers, man.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, it would have been rude not for the Villa podcast to not talk about this transfer window, mate, wouldn't it? Because I think it's fair to say it's been pretty insane. Now, we thought, do you know what? Let's do what all YouTubers do. We're going to do a tier list, guys. Okay, so there's three categories that I'm only now just telling Dan. So the categories we've got, Dan, right at the top, we've got unbelievable Jeff, top creme de la
Yep.
creme. We've got solid, and then we've got debatable. And I think we can sort of be loose with how we interpret those. And this obviously isn't like a best to worst ranking. I think they're all like there's good in all tiers, right? And there's probably bad in some more than others, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it, mate. And I guess we start with let's start with Daniel Marlon because today, as of recording, there has been the news that he won't be featuring in Aston Villa's Champions League squad for the knockout phase, which I'm sure is a devastating blow. But I trust that Unai Emery has communicated as very clearly as possible his reasonings for why. And at this point, we could only assume what those reasons are, mate. But that is probably a topic for another day in itself. This was a really interesting deal. I think, with a lot of the business, I've sort of got the incomings and outgoings written down here, and it has been one in, one out, right? And with how we've sort of replaced the squad, and this has been the sort of direct replacement for Jadon Philogene, which what a deal that was, by the way, getting over 20 million quid out of him for the short amount of time that he'd been back at the club. I really like this signing. Marlon is somebody who excited me a couple of years back when he sort of first burst onto the scene. Hasn't quite gone to plan at Dortmund, I think it's fair to say, mate. But he has qualities that Jadon and I think the squad both lack. He's very direct, he's very quick, has an eye for goal, as we obviously saw the other day against Wolves with that goal that was sort of wrongfully knocked off. I don't want to say that this is unbelievable, Jeff, but I think that this is probably, a strong contender for the solid category here, mate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. I think there's a very consistent theme with kind of these transfers. And from both of them, they're kind of we'll get on to talk about the other two, I'm sure, but kind of players who have maybe lost their way a little bit in recent years. Maybe haven't gone on to hit the heights that they were ticked to hit early on in their careers. Daniel Marlin certainly falls into that category. I don't think he's quite as wayward as someone like Marcus Rashford. I think he's been a confusing transfer. Like you kind of read the reports at Dortmund, and he's kind of a player that maybe certainly never lacks ability. Sometimes maybe lacks the effort. There were some kind of concerns about how engaging he is out of possession. How well is he going to fit into the press? He was someone that really shone on some elite stages, as you say. Like he had an incredible run in the European Championship, scored a great goal against Romania. Obviously featured in the Champions League final at the back end of last season. He's had some really high moments and some real low lows in kind of recent years. And so I think for Dortmund to kind of recuperate most of the value, if a little bit more that they got from the initial transfer out of the Eredivisie, I think represents a good deal for them. But it's going to be a fee that I think if Unai Emery is kind of right in his vision of being a manager that can get the most out of a player, then who knows where this transfer could be in a few months. Like, I got asked the other day about how I kind of viewed Villa's transfer business this January, and it's kind of like, did you come back to me in 2 or 3 months, maybe? It feels a little bit hard because with all of the players we've signed, we just don't know what we're going to get right now. But I think Daniel Marlon, to address the wings, which were certainly a priority position, we know we've been a little bit light out there. We've not been helped by Leon Bailey's form. I think to address that so early on is great. There is obviously that little bit of extra context, as you say, Nate. We're only allowed to add 3 new players to our Champions League squad for the back end of this season, sorry. And we're only allowed to have 3 players, and those 3 players have included 3 more players that we've signed in this January window, and another player that we've signed as well that hasn't quite made the cut. And I'm intrigued like that, mate. That's a really good point you raised. Like, that administrative thing, you'd like to think surely it was something that I would have been aware of when we signed him. So I can't imagine it's something that has necessarily had to break the news on in the last couple of days, but he will have to do it sensitively. And at least that really frees him up to have a good run, at Spurs this weekend and at the league games, and rotate that kind of front line a little bit more than maybe we have been doing. So I think solid is a very fair reflection of this one, mate.
Yeah, I think like in a way that this may actually help Villa, because I think in terms of how we've played in the fixtures after a European game, I feel like a lot is maybe being made of that, but it is definitely fair to say that we haven't necessarily had the best results and or performances in those games. So Marlon obviously won't travel, you would imagine, unless Unai is keen on maintaining that sort of familiar, sort of everybody's part of the squad mentality. You don't know really, but a fresh leg Daniel Marlon to come in to play in the Premier League after what could be a potentially very difficult tie. I think we've got Bruges, Sporting, Dortmund, and there's somebody else who it may be as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. So, and obviously that's it, Atalanta. So all incredibly tough opposition, as we well know. So, and again, if you beat those, you go deeper into the competition. Obviously, that's going to put a stress on people naturally. So maybe this is a good thing that when we sort of take ourselves out of Europe, that we have a fresh leg on your man. Also, as well, like on the complete other side of that, mate, we get knocked out instantly straight away, and it's not a problem, is it? Because there's no Champions League games for Marlon to miss out on because there's no more games.
Yeah.
That's maybe a sort of half empty way of looking at it, but it's another perspective for sure. But yeah, I definitely think this is a solid transfer. And next up, mate, Andres Garcia. I think one of the more interesting signings of this window, because obviously it's only was it January signed Costa Nedeljkovic and then had loaned him back to Red Star. Obviously Costa's gone to Leipzig, which is a really weird transfer in my opinion, because they've gone and signed Geertruida, who's a player I think we spoke about on this podcast in the summer, mate, as a right back that we were trying to sign. So it's like we missed out on a sort of a big target, if you like. He touted for a £35 million move. And, almost 6 months later, they've then replaced him with a right back who just can't get a look in for Villa. It's an interesting move, that one. But Garcia is clearly a buy for the future. And at such a small, €7 million from the Segunda Liga, Unai Emery clearly knows all about him. I believe Garcia has the same agent as Pau Torres as well. So I imagine that helps sort of grease those wheels a little bit somewhat. I liked what I saw against Wolves, mate. I don't know what you thought about him. I can't say I know too much about the guy, but the Levante fans were absolutely devastated that this man was going. And I've seen so many comments on social media about them promising to set record shirt sales with this guy's name on the back of the shirts, and has promised that the whole region of Spain will also purchase these shirts, mate. So I'm sure Chris Heck will be absolutely buzzing with the revenue from this transfer.
Yeah, for sure, mate. As you say, like there's definitely previous relationships, as you say, then, mate. That kind of same agent as Pau has certainly come in handy. Obviously, the ties with Munch and Emery too, and I think the fact that he went in against Wolves, I think, is a good sign. He was pulled at halftime, right? I'm not mistaken.
He was, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think like it was necessarily because he was having a bad game, but more, we bought kind of 3 or 4 subs on at halftime. We definitely needed a bit of a rocket in that one, and I think it's an interesting one. You kind of have to view it through the Nedeljkovic lens in a way, don't you? Really, in that there's clearly a player there, and we all remember kind of coming out of pre-season. I had Carsten Nedeljkovic, not quite a lock at right back, but he was in my FPL. I was like, this guy, he played a lot of minutes. He looks really exciting. There was those games at Warsaw where he came on and looked really, really energetic, and then kind of since then, he might have started at West Ham, or he was like, he was involved in those kind of early games. And then over time, it's just kind of petered out and petered out. And I think when you kind of see, Lamar Bogard has dropped back in there, Konza has gone in there, Matty Cash has done really well to kind of put himself at the starting right back. I think that's kind of a sign that the writing's been on the wall for Nedeljkovic for a little while. And I think Garcia kind of comes in, and it'd be very interesting to see kind of what he becomes over the next few months. He's only 21 years old, as you say. Got glowing reports from Levante fans who were very sad to see him go. I saw one saying he was better than Pedro Porro, which was like A, exciting. B, I was like, that's a niche, that's a very specific level to be like engaged with. Normally other fans would be like, oh yeah, he's better than like Cat Boo, but it was like, no, Pedro, very specifically, Pedro Porro, no better. And I was like, hey, he's that good. That would be a great move. And so yeah, it will be interesting. Obviously, it was kind of pitched that Nedeljkovic would be going back to hit Spain himself. So, but yeah, Steam Better likely was an interesting one. There was a couple of other young players. There was that Tidiam Gomis as well, playing in France. I think that we were linked with for a lot of the window. So it's clear we had feelers out for some kind of young talent on the continent, and Garcia's made the cut. And I'm always excited to see young players kind of come in, especially when they come from abroad. And obviously, we have a nice kind of Spanish contingent at the club that can kind of make him feel at home. But yeah, kind of where we get into this one so early is
It's tough.
it's going to be interesting, mate.
It's tough. It's tough. I think the way the like to speak on the transfer as a whole before we sort of categorize them in the tier list. I think we're kind of in this business now where like we didn't see a lot of Nedeljkovic, but as you say, I think at times there were positive signs. But he's a player that we signed for like 6-7 million euros, and Leipzig have an option to buy at around 14. So we're effectively doubling our money on somebody who, if we're being totally fair and honest, hadn't made a positive impression on the whole just yet. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is another one of those signings. I think we're operating in that stratosphere now where obviously with the financial constraints and PSR and all of that nonsense that I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing about, it straps you. And if, who knows what 6 months of Premier League football will do to Garcia's value. And, he could go anywhere. And also at the same time, he could just stick around as well. You don't know, but that's with my sort of cynical sort of football finance hat on. I think it has to go in debatable because he's come from
Yeah, I agree, mate.
a second division. It's definitely not an exciting signing, but he is somebody that I am excited about and I'm looking forward to see hopefully develop at the club for a long period of time. So yeah, I think we kind of have to put him in debatable for this one, mate. But
I agree, mate.
I think to be fair, with all of the players that we've got on this list so far, mate, I only think that like one is like dead cert for unbelievable, Jeff. I think that there's only one, and that's not to say that there's a bad window. I'm just very sort of cautiously optimistic about all of these guys. That leads me on to Axel Disasi, who is somebody I know not a lot of people are very warm on. I can totally understand why, but I can always guarantee that half of these people have not seen anywhere near as much of Axel Disasi as they're about to see, potentially, because we don't know how bad the Tyrone Mings injury is. I've actually seen him play for Monaco once when I was on holiday in France, and thought he looked okay. But I think at times, I think it's being in the Chelsea system, right? It's pretty brutal. Like even before this whole revolving door transfer nonsense, players can like pretty good players can get tuned up and thrown out at Chelsea. And I think he has just sort of been a bit unfortunate in they have crazy depth, especially in centre back, and has sort of been on the receiving end of one or two sus passes, maybe something that's led to a goal being created for the opposition side. I think, given the context of how this deal's gone, mate, or how the window had gone in terms of recruiting players, it would be wrong and arrogant of me to turn my nose up at Axel Disasi, especially when he showed as much desire as he did to come to Aston Villa rather than joining someone like Spurs. So this is where it gets a little bit blurred in the tears for me, mate, because I don't think he's a bad player at all. And he's obviously only here until the summer. The £6 million loan fee, £5 million loan fee. Obviously, we're covering a fair bit of the wages there as well. But ultimately, this is a signing that had to be made, isn't it?
Mate, he plays centre half. He plays centre half. That's the criteria. There's like Big John that plays with a dog and duck, or Axel Disasi. I don't care as long as we have someone to play centre half. You know, we've been playing. Can I say our best player who comes on?
Absolutely.
Season? Our best player.
Absolutely.
At centre half because we're so weak in that position, and you know we're looking to sign Champions League caliber kind of centre halves in January. It's a very hard market to go and shopping because no team is going to want their Champions League caliber centre half to go, and there's not a fat lot kind of floating around, and so yeah, considering how eager he was to come, you know there was that loan interest. I think you kind of also have to. It looked really like it wasn't going to happen. You know, I remember reading on deadline day morning, a report from the Athletic saying that a deal was unlikely because of the loan fee that Chelsea wanted and stuff. And so whether we just finally agreed to stump up the cash, it's around a £5 million loan fee, which is pretty expensive. It's going to be an interesting one. I don't think he is widely regarded as the best on the ball, but again, kind of falls into these, not like maybe nowhere near the extent of a Rashford and Asensio, but a player that maybe his career is flatlining, maybe a little bit, has kind of started to fall down the pecking order, as you say. Chelsea recalling the guys like Trevor Chalobah back from loan that you imagine are going to kind of come in higher than him. So the writing was on the wall for him that, you know, he probably had to look for a January exit. And he seems really keen to join Villa. And so I think, do I think he's an upgrade on Diego Carlos? I would probably say yeah. Considering how, you know, Diego's gone to Turkey and has picked up an injury kind of straight away. And so given kind of his injury record, just being available, I think makes him a kind of instant upgrade. And so, yeah, mate, you know, I'm not doing backflips. You know, I'm not rushing down the Villa store to get his name printed on the back of my home shirt just yet. But yeah, he's very good cover, has, you know, experience on the continent in the Premier League. And he's going to do a very, very good job kind of just offering us the ability to put guys like Booba back into midfield. And so, yeah, on that basis alone, I think this is a solid deal, in my opinion. I think it's the cover we need. It's a reputable player that's kind of coming from within the Premier League. Given how desperate we were in that position, I think if you'd have offered Villa fans this name on the 1st of January, I think you would have had a pretty blanket, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, mate. I think it's totally fair. And I was just wondering, like, this whole time we tried to get bad date, like there were so many centre half signings that just weren't happening, and I was like, at what point do we just not fucking phone up Clement Longley and bring Clem Dog back? Like, the reunion has to happen. I was adamant that Longley was going to come back because we'd have been like desperate, and I'd have been buzzing because, like, you know, like listeners of the channel know, I thought Longley got some very unfair flack. I don't think he's anywhere near as bad as people made him out to be. And he's probably just as good as Disasi is, if we're being totally honest. Maybe that's not endearing Disasi to any Villa fans that weren't as warm on Clem Dog as I was. But I was like, yeah, just bring him back. Let's run it back. Like, is he even playing at Atleti? I don't know. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I think Solid's right, mate. I think Solid's right. The next player. Now, I bloody love Marco Asensio, mate. And, you know you're a massive Real Madrid fan as well. This is a player who has, you know, had the world at his feet, had so much potential. The ceiling was genuinely so high. And unfortunately, he just never reached it, you know, due to a few bad injuries and, you know, just the Galactico nature of Real Madrid as well. This is a player that I was so hot on back in the day, mate. And I wasn't as excited as I thought I'd be when this happened. That being said, I still am really excited. I just thought I'd be more excited because this is a player that I would have, you know, I think, like, you know, if we went back 5, 6, 7 years ago, mate, and we're like, Marco Asensio is going to come to Villa, obviously we're like languishing in the Championship, you'd be like, fuck right off. That's never going to happen. This is an unbelievable deal. And I think some people may not be as warm on it as well because, obviously you had the option to come in the summer. We were pursuing him. I don't think we can begrudge a man for going and joining Paris Saint-Germain on a free transfer and wanting to live in Paris and play for the biggest team in that league at the moment, and all of the things that come with that financially and whatnot. But this also feels like a bit of a risk on like his end because he's not had as many minutes as he would have hoped for in PSG, which is, the main part of why this deal has actually happened. And I saw a funny tweet earlier, actually. It was like a full Pokemon evolution chain of Charmander to Charizard, and it started with Carles Gil as your Charmander, and as Charmeleon we had Emi Buendia, and Asensio is the Charizard, the final evolution of the techie Spanish-esque attacking midfielder. His quality is undeniable, mate. The question marks are whether he can stay fit for the rest of the season, and obviously the sort of wages that we're paying, because I do believe we're paying all the wages on this deal. I really want to say unbelievable, Jeff. I really want to say unbelievable, Jeff, but I'm just not sure, and I'm I'm sort of apprehensive for how this one goes. But like as you said, mate, this theme that's sort of running with all of these transfers of people that have got a point to prove. Asensio's got a massive one, mate. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, I mean, he's 29 years old. It's really kind of he's a really odd case, isn't he? Because he came through with such promise, kind of in those early years at Real Madrid. 61 goals, 32 assists in 286 appearances, won everything. Two Champions Leagues in his time there. Came off the bench in the Champions League final, scored in one. He scored I think the last goal in their 4-1 win against Juve. And kind of had this reputation for late cameos and saving the day. And then over time, as the Real Madrid kind of transfer cycle kicked into gear, he struggled with injuries and inconsistency. Again, there was questions about his out of possession work and stuff like that. Never really had a settled role as well, which I think is an interesting thing with all of those players that we've signed across the front line. Is if you kind of went to basically any point in football, okay, what's Marco Asensio's best position? Every single person is going to say the same thing. Uh, I think actually nobody really knows, and like obviously that's something that Unai likes. He likes players that can kind of play across the front line, that can play, maybe behind Ollie Watkins, play on the left, play on the right, and so it is interesting that kind of since he's gone to PSG, the same things have kind of blighted him. It is a often for the size of the club and, as you say, how many titles they win, it is a surprisingly quiet corner of European football. And so his fortunes over there haven't exactly been well told. Started out this season as to what people thought was going to be a regular PSG, started 4 in a row, scored 1, assisted 2, and then didn't make the pitch for the next 8 of 12 games. But in the kind of 12 league appearances he's made this season, he has had a direct goal involvement every 103 minutes. So that promise is there, but obviously playing for a caliber of club whereby the attacking options are so deep and so varied, and you've had kind of players like Bradley Barcola come through, who nobody really foresaw kind of how quickly his stock would be rising. Like guys that we talked about on the podcast before, mate, like guys like Lee Kandian have kind of gone there and been like almost completely forgotten. It can happen. And yeah, Marco kind of comes here. There's no option. There's no obligation on this loan. It is a straight, flat 6-month loan. Does not say we couldn't go back and sign him in the summer. That's just nothing packaged into this deal. And is that interesting? Is that interesting? Kind of as you say, mate, like the fact that we've not gone as we have with Rashford for looking to make this permanent. I'm sure if we wanted to, we could have looked at a loan for Marlon, but again, we had the confidence to go and execute on a fee. Someone that Emery's clearly liked for some time. He's there with João Felix as someone that we've kind of gone after in multiple windows. So let's see, mate. I do like him in the Villa system. I can see him playing kind of almost anywhere across the front line, really, apart from as a sole kind of number 9. Cutting in on that left foot. We've seen it so many times at the Bernabeu. But, I was watching his highlight clips from Real Madrid, and I was seeing like Juan Fran and Diego Godin. I was like, wow, okay, these La Liga men. Yeah, this it is Santander, man. Santander, man. It's like BBVA, man. We're going back some time to pick out his highlights. And so that it's been a while, but it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say unbelievable, Jeff, I think my head's saying solid. I think my head's
I'm
saying
happy with that,
solid.
mate.
I think we've got to go
Happy
with
with that.
that. There's there's risk reward with all of these, and maybe more so with Marcus Rashford, who we will obviously talk about now. But yeah, I think Asensio's solid. But where are you at with Rashford, mate? Because there's I feel really uncomfortable and have done, for quite a while with how the media sort of talks about Marcus Rashford and his personal life and all of this kind of stuff. Um, and it's like now that spotlight is on us, and I don't have a problem with players sort of going out and being in the club and doing all this. Obviously, not if you're doing it too much. Like, enjoy your job. Yeah, be disciplined, as Roy Keane would say. Um, and these guys are human at the same time. I just There's a massive risk factor here, mate. There is a massive risk factor, but the the facts are this is probably the highest profile of player ever to have joined Aston Villa in terms of like where he's been, what he's achieved, the ability and potential that is still there with Marcus is through the bloody roof, mate. And if this goes well, oh my God, this is like one of the signings of the decade already.
Yeah, this is like Coutinho. You know what I mean? Like the excitement of him like coming. That's the only really deal I can think of that kind of compares. Um, and mate, for the all of the players I've talked about kind of footballing things, and I don't think we need to sit out here and talk about kind of footballing context when it comes to Marcus Rashford. But one thing I am wary of, mate, and you touched on it brilliantly, is the narrative. It's the narrative. If he comes in and does well, Unai Emery is not going to get any of the credit. All of the talk is going to be Man United, another player leaving and going on to do well, and like it's just going to either way. This is just going to be a noise vacuum. I am surprised that surprised that English guys that are currently playing in Serie A, like you don't hear about those guys a tremendous amount. Off, like what holes pop up, but you don't hear about them much. And I do think Marcus Rashford is maybe in a different tier to those guys. But I always thought a move to Europe just made a lot of sense. And so it's interesting he has come to the Premier League. And that kind of media vacuum, that if he doesn't do well, you can imagine the furore. If he does do well, as I say, all the conversation is going to be about, Man United done it wrong. Look what, blah, blah, blah. It's really, really interesting. And what I think is most interesting is that, from all of the journalists around this, they're saying it's unlikely that Marcus Rashford does have a future at Man United. And I kind of have to wonder just how well, like 40 million is not a crazy fee. Like, just how well does he have to do for us to be comfortable and kind of pulling that trigger? That will be really interesting to see. And so, yeah, I mean, hey, this is the highest profile one by far. This is the most exciting deal by far. But there is still that just kind of lingering element of jeopardy with it all, mate.
I think there's too much to lose if this doesn't go right for Marcus, and that's what is sort of keeping me going with this one without meaning to sound like overly dramatic, because the ability's there. He's a wonderful player. On his day, he's like one of the best players in the world. Obviously the wages are a thing, but like that just is what it is, really. That's it comes with the nature of signing somebody like, as high profile as Marcus Rashford. But it kind of feels like the sort of general consensus of Rashford's time at United is that he had that fantastic season, 22, 23, the 30 goal season, and he was unbelievable. Gets this super big contract as a result of that. And obviously we've got Jim Ratcliffe coming into that club, who is, clearly the tightest man on earth. He's not even letting people have free lunch boxes, let alone, 350 grand a week or whatever the obscene amount it is that Marcus Rashford is on. And yeah, there's this kind of feeling that the club are like pushing out this sort of allegedly, all of these stories about how much of a trouble he is, on and off the field, all this kind of stuff to just get him gone because they don't want to pay him, which is just ridiculous. And yeah, I think, as I say, I think there's too much for Marcus to lose here if this doesn't go well, and I'm not sure where he goes that would give him the same opportunity to reached the levels that he still wants to be at and can be at. I do believe. I mean, we're in the bloody Champions League. Manchester United fans talk about it's been a downgrade. The 13th. Like, come on. This is like he's stepping up. This is a great move for Marcus. And all these people talk about, oh, what a sign it, PR, this is unbelievable. He's got 130 million Instagram followers. Unai's not signing people based off their Instagram following, guys. He just isn't. Obviously, that there is some commercial benefit to that allegedly, but that's not what Unai and Monchi are discussing on the blower when he's saying I can bring you Marcus Rashford. He's not gone. How many Instagram followers has he got? But I think this has to be unbelievable, Jeff. I think this has to be unbelievable, Jeff.
Yeah, I can't. There's too much excitement. As again, ask me in a few months when there's too much excitement around this right now to put this anywhere else, mate.
Absolutely. It's a solid window. It's turned out to be a really solid window. And I just hope that everybody who was tweeting Monchi out and is still probably tweeting Monchi out will just chill out, because transfers aren't straightforward things. They can be really easy. They can be done quickly, but like the whole like centre back debacle, like that was, we were always going to have the teething problems of trying to bring somebody in when we've let somebody go, 2 weeks before the deadline. Like things aren't straightforward, and I just think that we won't see the sort of fruits of this until the end of the season, perhaps, mate. But I think we've done some really good business, and I think overall it's been really solid. The outgoings as well, mate, to touch on quickly. John Duran, really happy that went through, especially for the fee. Philogene barely contributed towards the end. Amazing fee there. Carlos, you get like what, 15 million euros. It's not the end of the world, is it? It's essentially half of what we paid for him, considering he's suffered bad injuries and has been inconsistent. I think that's fine. I think potentially the best outgoing deal is actually Emi Buendia to buy Leverkusen, mate, on loan with an option to buy for 20 million euros. That again will probably come up to be half the amount that we paid for him, which again isn't the end of the world when he's had an ACL injury and not really featured as much. We've touched on the Nedeljkovic. I think Illing Jr., interesting that he's gone to Middlesbrough. They seem to be a club that we trust a lot. Louis Barry, that's a really good deal, I think. Get him playing a level higher. Lewis Dobbins to Norwich, I don't really have an opinion on that. Joe Gauch to Barnsley, I imagine he'll play a bit, considering they lost Gabriel Slanina, who he had like a hand injury or something like that. So I expect Gauchi to play a lot of League One football for like a pretty decent side. So overall, mate, it's been a bloody good window. It's been a bloody good window. And I think it's difficult. Like I don't have any criticism for Monchi or for the club for how they've been going. And I just think Damien Vindengai is just a really wholesome man, just based off his tweets, mate. I love that. I really love it.
Yeah, no, mate, absolutely. I do think the best bit of business we've done this January is the John Duran sale. I think it's the best. To sell him to Saudi was the best possible option for us as a club, because selling him to another club in the Premier League just would have been kind of heartbreaking. And we sell him for a price that probably no one else in Europe was going to stump up in January. And if the problems were like off the field, like at this club, can every say, mate, how wholesome everything is, how good the vibes are right now, how well this club is going. Like a player like that, kind of reading the kind of athletic reports about it consistently, late to training, like coming in with a bad attitude, not necessarily training very well. There's nothing really on the pitch that can kind of make up for that. And whilst, he leaves with his head high, some iconic Villa moments, to kind of fetch that fee in January and send him to the other side of the world where hopefully he won't have to score at Villa Park. But at the very least, a considerable amount of time is a very good outcome. So, yeah, I'm very happy with that one, mate. And with the window as a whole, I think we needed a bit of a refresh. Felt like things were going a little bit stale. I think all this new life and kind of that's been injected into the club will do as well. And there's so much excitement around the game Sunday.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. It's going to be one for the ages, especially if we win. I think there's a really good opportunity to go and beat Spurs, considering the state that they're in. This Zoom's about to end, so that is all we'll talk about on that Spurs game. But I think ultimately, like, just my final thought on that Duran deal was just the facts that somebody had to be sacrificed for PSR, right? Somebody had to go. And, there's all this talk about Arsenal offering like 40 million for Watkins, that he was potentially being shopped around by us as well because we were unsure if this Duran deal was going to go through or not. Somebody had to go. And at this moment in time, I'd rather not lose Ollie Watkins, especially if it meant that John Duran would be our main and only striker, because I just don't think that he offered anywhere near enough. The ability's there, but the application is not. And it stops us from having to throw Boubacar Kamara into that sort of PSR sacrificial hole of fire. Because I genuinely believe if we lost Kamara, then this whole operation fucking crumbles, and it would be very bad if we lose Boubacar Kamara. So, the fact he
Yeah,
signed a new deal not too long ago, he's still here. We can play him back in the midfield now. We've got Disasi in. This has been this has been like a solid A window, mate. This has been really bloody
100%.
good. But guys, let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below on these signings. I'm excited to see them all play. I really am. And this Spurs game is going to be exciting because obviously Ollie's not there, so Rashford may play through the middle, which we know is something that he's not too keen on. Disasi can't play; he's cup tied. But Asensio, I imagine we'll see him. I imagine we'll see Marlon. I imagine we'll see Garcia. So yeah, that'll be great. But yeah, if you guys haven't already, like, comment, subscribe. The Villa Villa's back, baby. Up the Villa.